Welcome back, friends. Today I want to share with you some popular baby items that you don't need. And before having a baby, I heard really conflicting reports. Some people said, oh, there's so many things that you need to get for a baby. Others said that you didn't really need much. I knew I wanted to do things a bit more minimally, but I had a really hard time finding the specifics of what are some of the items that people say you need that you can actually get by without. I feel like I'd see that you don't need a wipe warmer and a bottle sterilizer like over and over and over again, but really nothing else. But now that we're almost out of the newborn phase, I feel like I have a really good grasp now on what we did and didn't use and what you can really get by without. So today I want to share basically the list I wish that I could go back and give my past self of newborn essentials that you don't really need. So here we go. These are 33 things that you don't need for a newborn. Some of them are things that I'm glad that we didn't buy, others that I regret that I did. And in a few cases too, I want to share what I'd recommend buying instead. So let's start with diapers. Obviously diapers are an essential, but I didn't realize just how quickly newborns grow out of not just newborn size diapers, but also size 1. Oliver is already onto size 2 diapers, and even though I didn't feel like I had a massive amount of size 1 diapers, we ended up with 2 leftover boxes. Unfortunately, I was able to exchange them for a larger size, but I've talked to so many friends who ran into the exact same problem and they had way more size 1 newborn diapers than they needed. So what I'd recommend is don't stockpile tons and tons of diapers and instead try to buy them as needed, because you just don't know how long your baby is going to be in a specific size for. And one of the ones that I feel probably the most strongly about, I wish someone had warned me about ahead of time, is not to buy an aesthetic nursing pillow. I'll admit I fell victim to the form over function trap, but at the same time I didn't realize just what a difference a functional, well-designed breastfeeding pillow really can make. I started off with the Snuggle Me nursing pillow that's shaped like a crescent moon. It's really pretty, but I really struggled with breastfeeding in the beginning, and I truly believe that that pillow was a big part in that. So only a couple weeks in, I switched over to using the My Breast Friend pillow, which is recommended to me by our lactation consultant, and I can honestly say it made a world of difference, and it's one of the most significant factors in really just changing the trajectory of our breastfeeding journey. So highly recommend when you're picking a breastfeeding pillow, opt for function over form. This is just one of those things where who cares if it's pretty, you want to get something that works. Okay, then another big one, we're starting off strong here. That's lots of options to try. This really just goes across the board. I think I saw finding the perfect pacifier, bottle, swaddle, whatever, as this science of needing to find just the right one for my baby, otherwise they wouldn't eat, they wouldn't sleep, whatever it was. And so I felt like I had to have all of these options on hand because who knew what my baby was going to like. But with pretty much everything, my baby took to the first option recommended by friends. And so I had lots of different sample bottles that I never used because my baby found one brand he liked right away. And the same thing for swaddles, for pacifiers, and other items as well. So what I'd recommend for this one is skip all of the sample boxes that have 5 different pacifiers, 5 different swaddles, whatever it is for you to try, and instead do your research, pick the one brand that you think is going to be the best fit for you, give that a try, and then only go out and try something else if what you have doesn't work. And even better too, if you have a friend who's maybe a couple stages ahead of you with their baby, just ask if you can borrow some things to try out from them. Most of the time they're going to be willing to do that. That can be a great way to just figure out what it is that's going to be helpful to you, and then you can go out and buy that. And that way you don't end up with tons and tons of one-offs of a specific brand of bottle or swaddle. Then let's also talk about clothing. Make sure that any clothing that you buy for your baby is seasonally appropriate. Right now we're in the middle of summer and my baby has some outfits that are pants and long sleeves, and the problem is it doesn't matter how cute it is. If I dress him in those items, he's just going to be way too hot. It's 90 degrees outside. So as you're looking to buy clothing for your baby, do the math, figure out approximately what size they're going to be in a given season, and buy clothing that's going to be seasonally appropriate. All right, then something that I don't regret purchasing, but that we really haven't needed for the newborn stage is a crib. Oliver has slept in a bassinet since he was born, and we don't have plans to move him over to his crib anytime soon. So I'm sure his crib will come in handy eventually when, in a couple of months, we decide to move him over to that. But especially in the newborn stage, you don't need a crib if they're sleeping in the room with you. The same thing goes if they're sleeping sleeping in their crib, you don't need a bassinet. So during the newborn stage, you can kind of get away with one or the other, which I think is helpful to keep in mind, especially if you're shorter on space or even just wanting to space out purchases for your child. Then one, maybe more controversial one, is a baby swing. Unfortunately, we didn't end up buying a swing. We were able to just borrow one from a friend to try out. And I am so glad that we didn't spend money on one because we tried it several times with Oliver and he wasn't a fan. It was like the moment you put him in it, the waterworks would begin, tears would start flowing, and he far preferred the bouncer that we got for him. We still use that daily, but what I would say is if you have maybe a friend, a family member, someone who you can just try out a swing with your child, that might get you a better sense of whether or not they're going to enjoy that and if it would even be a useful purchase for you to consider making. So those things are expensive if your baby's not going to use it a lot. And I mentioned this one briefly at the beginning, but we haven't found that we needed a bottle sterilizer at all. Whenever we've gotten in new bottles, pump parts, whatever, we just boil them in a pot of water for 5 minutes and then from there just use our dishwasher to sterilize everything. It does the job just fine. We haven't run into any issues and it's just one less baby item that you need to go out and buy. And the same thing goes for a bottle warmer. We opted not to purchase one, and instead, if we're ever trying to warm up a bottle of milk, we'll just stick the bottle into a cup of hot water, and that pretty quickly does warm up the milk just fine. And then one kind of higher ticket baby item that I think that you can get by without is the Owlet or any kind of smart baby monitor. I think if there's one thing that being a parent has taught me, it's that excessive worrying really just isn't productive. And unfortunately, there's so much marketing when it comes to baby items that's very fear-based. And personally, what I found is that, especially with some of these things that help you to hyper monitor your baby, rather than doing what they claim to in reducing your fear and anxiety, it just makes you more conscious and on edge of every single little thing. And personally, I found a lot of peace in not trying to really monitor everything and instead just letting my mom instincts be the guide and seeing if my baby's okay, if he needs anything. And hey, maybe you're built differently than I am, but I think for me, things like that only serve to increase my anxiety rather than to reduce it. Then moving on, something else that I really don't think is a need is a baby bathtub. I will say I am a bit conflicted with this one because the one that we have is really cute. It's shaped like a little whale, but it takes up so much space and it's hard to store. So realistically, I don't know that we're going to end up keeping it long term just because I don't want to go to the hassle of storing it away for future kids, and probably going to opt for a more space-saving option. And since having Oliver, I've learned that there are so many different ways that you can go about bathing your kid that don't involve a little baby bathtub that are just a lot easier and more practical. So likely going to go that route with future kids. Even though it's cute, it's just one of those things that it's one extra thing to buy and it's a lot to store. Now let's talk about baby mitts. I didn't buy any and never felt like I needed them either. We do have a handful of sleepers that have the little mitts that flip over, so in the first few weeks we did use those a handful of times. But for the most part, we've just let our baby have his hands free. I think he's enjoyed having the freedom of being able to use his hands. Now, obviously, if you forgo mitts, it does mean that you have to be a bit extra careful to make sure that their nails are properly trimmed. But for me, it's worth it. Plus, everyone I know who did use mitts said that their baby was always squirming them off anyways. And something else that we haven't used yet is our baby monitor. I will say that I do think that this is one that will come in handy when we eventually move Oliver in here to his nursery. But at least for the newborn phase, we haven't needed it because he sleeps in the bedroom with us. So while this is one of those things that's helpful to have down the road, you don't necessarily need it right when your baby's born. Okay, then just a quick one is Gripe water. I ended up buying some after I saw several lists that said that it's one of those helpful health-related things to have on hand for your baby, but then the more that I looked into it, there's some pretty sketchy research behind it. It doesn't look like there's actual like proof that it does anything. Might just be a placebo effect, but we decided just not to use it, and I'm probably gonna try passing it on to someone else, but I don't know that the research actually says that it's all that helpful. So to me, it just feels like one less thing that you can buy. Okay, wait, pause. Need to go feed Oliver. I'll be back. Okay, hi. Where were we? Let's talk toys. You really don't need much if anything, for the newborn phase. Some contrast cards are nice, maybe a couple of rattles. Babies that young can't grasp things, they can't really play and interact. Honestly, in the first couple of weeks, they can barely look. So having lots of toys just isn't necessary. You can literally put random household objects in front of your baby and they will be just as interested in them as the toys. Oh, and for contrast cards, if you're looking to save money, just create your own using white paper and a Sharpie. For the newborn phase, it is one of the biggest areas where I'd recommend saving over splurging. And something else that we've just done without and that I haven't felt that we were missing out at all with is a humidifier. And I will say with this one, I do understand how something like this could be useful if you're living in a really dry climate or it's the middle of winter. But living here in the South where it is incredibly humid most of the year, I just don't feel like it would serve a practical purpose. So with this one, I'd really just recommend considering what your climate is and deciding whether or not it's something that would be helpful or not. And something else that we just decided to go without is a wipe warmer. Whether it's because you're out for a few hours, you're traveling, whatever, you're just not always going to have access to warm wipes. From my perspective, I thought it would be most helpful just to get my baby used to regular wipes from the get-go. That said, we did end up getting a weighted wipes dispenser that doesn't warm the wipes. It was probably a quarter or less of the price, but we have found that really useful. It's not a need per se, but it is really helpful and makes getting just one wipe out at a time a lot easier. And something I'd recommend getting either one or the other with is nail clippers or nail files. You do need one because baby nails grow fast, but you don't need both. We decided to opt for the electric nail file that helps to remove sharp edges, and I'm really happy with that decision, especially since we haven't really used mitts, but you can really go either way with this. But then going back to toys, something else that I want you to hear you don't need is expensive toy subscriptions. I'm talking Lovevery, KiwiCo. I will say we did end up borrowing part of the 0 to 3 month Lovevery kit from a friend, and apart from one little thing of contrast cards, that's really all the toys that we used. But they're expensive. That's why we borrowed them. And the marketing of these companies makes them seem like it's the best possible option for your baby. But I'm here to tell you, really anything will do. Especially with a newborn, they're going to be just as interested in the black and white logo on your shirt as they are that expensive toy that you got them. So I just want to take the pressure off you. Yeah, if you have the money for them, they can be a good option, but buying them is not going to make your child leaps and bounds ahead developmentally. And less expensive options, second-hand toys, and even household items are going to help them to learn to engage with the world around them just fine as well. There's not any magic to them, they're just toys. And one more thing along those lines before there's a bunch of other things that I want to address is a playmat. We got one, it's really cute, it's shaped like a leaf, but we've only used it a couple of times. Instead, most of the time, we've just opted for a blanket on the floor. We have a muslin National Parks one, which we love because it's super soft, and Oliver loves it because it's super high contrast as well. I love that because it's something that can grow with him as opposed to his playmat, which is fairly small and he's just going to grow out of a lot faster. So I'd say if you're looking to keep things minimal, skip the playmat and instead just opt for a soft, versatile blanket. Then back to clothing, something that I'd recommend avoiding, especially in the newborn and 0 to 3 month sizes, is anything Impractical. So anything with tons of snaps or buttons. A couple is fine, but any more than like 3 or 4, it becomes more of a hassle than it's worth. Outfits with multiple pieces, shorts, shirts, pants, especially when your baby is so tiny, it's just a pain to put them on, and the shirts always end up riding up the back if you try holding them. Anything that you have to take off completely in order to change the baby's diaper. As your baby gets older, it's fine to have a few pieces that are not the most practical, but maybe are really cute. But especially when your baby is itty bitty, I honestly just didn't find it worth it to have pieces of clothing like that. The ones we had, we just never put Oliver in because it was too much work. And one that I debated putting on here, but ended up deciding to, is an infant lounger, so like a Snuggle Me or DockATot. We have a Snuggle Me and we do use it, but I don't think I'd consider it a need. I mean, half the time we're setting the baby down on a blanket on the floor or even just nested in the crease between our couch cushions. And it serves basically the same purpose. So I'd consider this one of those things that might be nice to have, but it's not a need. And I don't know that we repurchase. Now let's go through a couple of these a bit more quickly. Stuffed animals. I don't think I bought a single one for Oliver, and he still has so many. People will give them to your baby. Don't bother adding to it by buying them yourself. And if they don't, ask a fellow mom friend and they'll probably be happy to give you plenty. A high chair. Yes, you'll probably want one eventually, but your newborn couldn't use it even if they wanted to. So if you're short on space, you're just wanting to space out purchases, this is definitely one of those things that you can wait on until your baby's ready for it. Something else you can skip is an expensive stroller. Your baby will be just as safe and a cheaper stroller will work just as well. We've literally been using a little stroller caddy since Oliver was born and we never felt like we needed more. You can also skip bath toys with a newborn. Your baby won't even be able to interact with them until they're older, but even then, less is more. Then something else you can get by without is baby-specific laundry detergent. Now you do want to make sure you're using something a bit more mild that's not super strongly scented because that can irritate their skin. That pretty much describes what Christopher and I were already using for ourselves. We've just washed our baby's things with the same detergent we use and haven't had any problems at all. I had several people tell me that a pack and play really isn't a necessity because they're super bulky, they're not all that portable, and there are just better options available. So instead, we decided to get a travel crib, which is lighter, more compact, and makes travel easier. We've already used it a couple of times and really happy with the decision. Then one more bulky item that we decided not to purchase is a dedicated changing table. Instead, we've been using a dresser, which can grow with our child. We just put the changing pad on top and some diapers and wipes in one of the drawers. Then one kind of more specific one is Cradle Cap treatment and products. Our baby got Cradle Cap like a lot of babies do. I actually went out and bought a fairly expensive Cradle Cap treatment. I intended to use it, but decided to see if I could get it to go away naturally first, just using proper bathing technique and a soft hairbrush that we already had on hand. And in just a couple of days of doing that, it disappeared completely. I didn't end up needing the treatment at all. Unfortunately, as with a couple of other things, I was able to return the unused treatment, but I actually did some research into this afterwards, and the recommended course of treatment really does involve things that you probably already have for your baby. And just a few more here for bathing. Something that's not a need is baby washcloths. The washcloths we got came in something like a pack of 10 and we use max 2 at a time. So not only is this an area to end up with way more than you need, but realistically you can use your own soft towels on your baby, or the material that burp cloths are made of is pretty much identical. You could just use those instead too. So just something to keep in mind if you want to keep things a bit more minimal. All right, then another one that I feel fairly strongly about is an expensive diaper bag. Your diaper bag is going to get dirty. It might get spit up on, might get pooped on, and likely you're only going to use it for a few months to a few years anyways. Plus, a lot of the more affordable diaper bags on the market have all the same features as the expensive ones. And so in talking about where to splurge versus save, this is definitely one of those categories where it's a great idea to save some money, just buy a cheaper diaper bag. And just one more clothing related one, because clothes are an important topic, but I'd recommend avoiding having too many baby clothes, especially for the newborn and 0 to 3 month sizes. I feel like I've heard from a lot of people not to get too many newborn size items. I think the same thing goes for 0 to 3 month clothing as well. Your baby's only going to be in the newborn size clothing for probably a handful of weeks, but they'll only be in the 0 to 3 month clothing for a couple months too. So what I'd recommend is start with less than you think you need, and then if you need to, buy more. It's just a lot easier and more cost effective to do that rather than have tons and tons of outfits that your baby never even gets to wear. And it's hard to put an exact number on it because every baby is so different, but what I'd probably recommend is to begin with 4 to 7 pajamas, so footy sleepers or whatever you want to have your baby sleeping in, and then 4 to 7 outfits for the daytime as well, whether that's cute outfits, casual things, whatever, and then just go from there. If you do laundry a lot, that's probably all you'll need. If you do it less frequently, you might need more, but I think that's a good baseline and you can just adjust and refine it as needed. Then the last thing that I don't think you need for your newborn is formula. And obviously, if you're going the bottle feeding route from the get-go, just ignore everything I'm saying here. But if you're planning to exclusive breastfeed, hear me out. I had several people recommend buying formula ahead of time to have on hand just in case. But formula is a pretty expensive thing to go out and buy just in case. And I never ended up needing it. But the thing is, even if I did, there are so many places nearby that either I could have gone out, Christopher could have gone out and picked some up to bring it home, could have had it delivered in just a couple of hours. The accessibility of it makes it one of those things that, in my opinion at least, you can just wait until you figure out whether or not you need it and just go out and buy it if necessary. It makes it just one less thing to store and to spend money on. All right, well, I know that was a lot, but that's the list. Those are some of the popular baby products that I think you can get by without. I really hope my heart came across in this. If you use some of these items, I think that's amazing that they worked for you. I just wanted to give kind of like my past self a list of things that you don't need, or that maybe you can get by without, that you can delay, just because there are so many things marketed to new parents as essential, when really I do strongly believe that we can get by with a lot less than we think we need. But that isn't at all to say that some of these things aren't helpful. So I hope that this was helpful, but if it wasn't, as my mom always said to me growing up, chew the meat, spit out the bones, take what of this is helpful and ignore the rest of it. But now I'd love to know, what are some popular baby products that you don't think are necessary? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. And as always, friends, don't forget to give this video a like if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.